All right, so today we're diving into a piece of literature that's had a pretty big impact. Like it's one of those works that you just can't escape if you're studying English literature.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It really is. We're talking about John Milton's On His Blindness. But, you know, what I think is so cool about this sonnet is that it's not just some dusty old poem that only academics care about.
Right.
It speaks to something I think we've all felt,
Mm-hmm.
like dealing with setbacks, loss, or just trying to figure out what we're supposed to be doing with our lives.
Absolutely. And I think what makes it resonate so strongly, even centuries later, is the fact that Milton was writing from a place of deep personal experience. I mean, he wasn't born blind.
Right.
He actually lost his sight completely in his 40s,
Wow.
which is just mind-blowing if you think about it. Here he was, already a renowned poet, and suddenly his world is plunged into darkness.
Yeah, and you can really feel that struggle in the poem. Like right from the start, he's wrestling with this sense of loss. But it's not just about the physical limitations of being blind, is it?
No, it goes way deeper than that. It's this feeling that his ability to serve God through his writing, which is like his calling, his purpose, it's like that's been taken away.
Yeah, he even talks about his light being spent, which of course is directly referencing his sight, but it's also so symbolic, right?
Oh, absolutely. Light in this context is so much more than just physical sight. It represents his creativity, his spiritual understanding, even his life force, and now it's gone, which makes the darkness he's experiencing even more profound.
Right. It's not just the absence of light. It's just this feeling of being lost, cut off from his purpose. And that ties into his faith too, right? Because he was a very devout man.
Absolutely, and this loss really throws him into a crisis of faith. He's grappling with this question of what God expects from him now. He still feels this intense need to serve, but his blindness feels like this huge barrier.
Yeah, you can almost hear him asking, if I can't write these grand epics anymore, am I failing in my duty to God?
Right, and that question, it's so relatable even today, isn't it? Like, how do we use our talents, whatever those may be, to serve something larger than ourselves?
It really is a universal question. It makes you think about how we define service in the first place.
Exactly. Is it about achieving some big, noticeable accomplishment? Or are there quieter, maybe even more meaningful ways to show up for each other and even for ourselves?
Yeah, and I think that tension is really at the heart of the poem, especially when he brings up the parable of the talents.
Oh, that's such a crucial part of the poem.
It is, because in that parable, right, these servants are given money, and some invest it wisely and do well, but others bury it out of fear. And it just feels like Milton's drawing a direct parallel to his own fear, that he's burying his talent because of his blindness.
Yes, and I think that fear of not doing enough, of wasting our potential, it's something so many of us can relate to.
It really is, but what's so powerful about on his blindness is that it doesn't end in despair.
No, it doesn't.
Milton actually finds a way to work through that fear and eventually come to a place of peace and acceptance. And I think a lot of that has to do with the structure of the sonnet itself.
That's such a good point. You have those first 12 lines where he's really wrestling with God, struggling with this sense of loss and inadequacy.
Yeah.
And then you get to that final couplet, those last two lines, and there's this incredible shift.
It's like a sudden realization, a moment of clarity.
Exactly. It's like he realizes that maybe true devotion isn't about outward achievements or grand gestures, but about having the strength to accept what you can't change and find meaning even in the midst of suffering.
And that even patience can be a form of service, which is such a powerful and honestly comforting message.
It really is.
It makes you think about all the ways we might be blind in our own lives, What are the things we're not seeing or understanding that might be holding us back? Something to think about, that's for sure.
It definitely is. On His Blindness isn't just about literal blindness, it's about those metaphorical blind spots that we all have and how we choose to navigate them.
Exactly, and I think that's part of what makes this poem so timeless and universally relevant.
I couldn't agree more. It's a poem that stays with you long after you've read it. It makes you question, reflect, and hopefully, ultimately, it inspires you to confront your own blind spots with a little more courage and a lot more grace.
Perfectly said.